So this section is giving you just some basics of APA style, which is the style that you will be using in all of your classes for social sciences. So we might think of APA style as being nothing but dictates for how to cite your sources. But in fact, it's much more than that. It's actually dictating a particular scientific writing style, and we might capture it in this old Joe Friday phrase, "the facts, ma'am, just the facts." And so the scientists who are trying to advance the research don't want to be entertained by your work. They don't want to they don't want you to be colorful or creative. They don't want you to draw attention to yourself. They really want you to relate the scientific findings as quickly and clearly as possible. So to that end, you need to make sure that you are objective. All eyes are on the phenomenon, not the writer. We'll talk about more of these in the next slides. You want it to be empirical, evidence-based, no opinions, no beliefs, no speculations, just the facts. You want it to be concise, writing as brief as possible to minimize word usage, as few words as possible to convey your point. And so if you're going to achieve that, your language has to be precise. You have to choose the right word to say exactly what you mean to say, and that will help you to be concise, to convey your meaning. And then you need to be sourced. Every piece of information that is introduced is sourced. So, objective and empirical. So picture yourself as a team member with the other scientists who are interested in your topic. You're working together toward an objective goal. You want to learn more about this dependent variable. So as you kind of outline the research that you're building on, you want to keep the focus on the learning, not the scientists. So everything that you do is objectively stepping back and just talking about the research. As an author, you're invisible in the lit review. So you're going to use third-person language, like they or the findings revealed. And the only place first person is allowed, like I or we, is when you're in the procedure. That can be, some scientists don't use it even then, but you could use it then if you're going to say, next we will expose subjects to the first stimulus or something like that. You want to make sure that you're using empirical evidence with sources that are described. So everything is well-founded. There's no speculation, nothing like that. So for example, you're not going to write, "we think," because that's an opinion. Instead, you want to write, "these findings may suggest that." Again, you're focusing on that research, not on some arbitrary thought that you have. Try and be very specific. Not research shows in a general way, but previous experimental research by Genet et al. 2005 and Offen et al. 2008 have found that, and then tell what they found. This phrase et al., it's actually an abbreviation for et alis or et alia, and it means and others. And it's commonly used in the research literature, and so you don't usually put a comma after the author's name, just like if you were saying Genet and others, you wouldn't have a comma. And we have this period here because it's an abbreviation for et alia. So Genet et al. Just means Genet and others, and that's the common way of writing it in the research. So because your scientist doesn't want to spend a lot of time reading frivolous things, they want to get to the point, you have to be concise in your writing. And that word concise means that you're using the fewest number of words possible to communicate your idea. So choose exactly what it is that you're trying to communicate. So you have to be very clear in your own mind. And then also make sure that what is not important must be excluded. So this takes a discriminating mind, and it takes some time to figure out what needs to be communicated and what doesn't. But do your best to always ask yourself, is this really important? And so you also then have to be precise in your language. Use the exact words that communicate the idea. Don't use the wrong word. So don't choose a word that sort of means what you mean to say. Be as precise as you can. In describing studies, important information will include these types of things. So this is what might be important. The method of the study or studies you're talking about. So was it experimental, quasi-experimental, randomly assigned? What was the method? Who was involved? You don't have to be as specific as the researchers, but in general, we should know, was it males, females, college students, Navajo people? Who was involved? What were the key findings that relate to your own proposal? And very important, what did they miss? What's the limitation that they address or the missing piece that they didn't examine? So these are the kinds of things that would be important as opposed to some other things that you might read that would be less important. So always when you're reading, place your focus on what the researchers in this particular study did. Don't pay quite as much attention to their lit review, because in the lit review they're citing other people's work, but what you're going to cite is their work. Some phrases to avoid. We believe. Avoid any phrases with believe unless, of course, you're studying beliefs. The word believe implies faith without evidence. Like if someone says they believe in God, there's no way to dispute that point because it's a belief. They don't have evidence, and or at least they don't have evidence that could be disproven, or counter evidence could be provided. And so it's faith without negatable evidence. So in the sciences, we really rely only on evidence. So anytime you say believe or words that are similar to that, then you're getting outside of the range of science. This doesn't mean that scientists don't have beliefs. Many do. It's just that a research paper isn't the place for beliefs, because in a research paper we're building on things that we have material evidence for. You might say instead, evidence from these studies suggests that, instead of saying we believe that. Avoid anything with the word prove. We can't prove things in sciences. We can only find evidence for or against. It's also possible that someone in the future could find disconfirming evidence for what it is that you just stated you proved. So in the sciences, we're always gathering new information, and so what we have today might support a theory that in the future we might have evidence that doesn't support it. So we don't ever really embed ourselves and say this is proven, because that just can't happen. So instead you might see evidence from these studies supports the theory that, and you might express it that way. So as you're writing, pay attention to basic grammar. It's your responsibility to submit a lit review that observes basic grammar and spelling formalities. So you're going to have to proofread your work. One good starting point is to read your whole paper out loud, because as you're reading out loud, you're going to catch awkward phrases or things that aren't very clear, especially if you're reading to someone else. They'll tell you if it doesn't make sense. And then there are some programs that will automatically check things if you don't feel yourself strong in that area. Dene College subscribes to Grammarly, and you can use that as an automatic check for your grammar. And Microsoft Word also has a spelling checker and a grammar checker that may be helpful. And so you are taking this class. You've already had your English class at an appropriate level. So I expect you to do your due diligence and proofread your paper and avoid these kinds of spelling errors and things that you might have made when you're a much younger student or a student in high school or middle school. You shouldn't turn in a paper with those kinds of errors. So take your care and turn in something good. If I see a paper where there's a lot of that sort of error, not errors in like presenting the literature, you're just learning that skill, but errors in the skills that you've already learned, skills related to grammar or spelling, paragraph structure, things like that. Those are the things that you need to tease out before you submit your paper. I won't accept it otherwise. Citing your sources, every statement that is made has a scientific source. You need to reference it in proximity to the information. So anytime you make a statement or present some information, you cite it right away. So for example, you might be able to cite it at the start of a statement. Here we're citing the research right up front. Keffler and colleagues in the year 2010 found in a survey study of 250 children, and so on. And right here, this Keffler and colleagues 2010, that's the citation. Or you might cite it at the end of the statement. A survey of 257 teenage children revealed that, ... and then the citation afterwards, here's that Keffler et al. 2010. Notice in both cases we include the year. So that is one thing. Whenever you present the author's names, always the year follows. The only exception is if you're citing the same study for the second time in a single paragraph, then you don't have to put the year. Other than that, the year is always included. So if it's well-established research, like research linking smoking with cancer, there's tons of research on that. Then, you might just list examples of supportive research using this phrase e.g., which means for example. And so then you might list several studies as examples of studies that show that smoking is linked to cancer. It might look like this. Previous research has shown that ostracism leads to feelings of hostility, e.g., for example, Williams et al. 2016, Twenge et al. 2018. So I've just given 2 examples of studies that support this statement. But now notice this, I continue, and aggressive behavior. And now I tell you who did that study, DeWall et al. 2019. So you can see here how we've used several citations creatively, or not creatively, accurately in a single sentence. So that's the kind of thing you're working toward in your lit review. Be patient with yourself. It's a skill that needs to be developed. So finally, you do need to have a reference page. So every source that you cite in the body of your lit review should be sourced in the reference page. So you reference in the APA style, and note that often you can download the citation for an article you find. So sometimes if you just go to the library link where you found the citation, you'll find a place that says cite this article, and then you can download an APA style citation. However, you always need to check and make sure they did it right. And so, for example, this is how APA style is done. You list the author's names, then you list the year in parentheses followed by a period. Then the title of the article, and notice that it's not capitalized. The only words that are capitalized are the first word, any word that immediately follows a colon, and any proper nouns like names. There's a period at the end of the article. Then the journal that it's from is italicized, and then it's followed by the volume and issue if it's available, and then the pages. And then it ends with this DOI, the library listing for the article. If you have lots of authors, then you list the last name and first initial, or first and second initial if it's given, and you put this ampersand in the middle, and then the year, 2010, with a period. Same thing here, they've done the title of the article in non-italicized words without capitals unless it's after a colon or the first word. Then the journal is italicized. Then here they have the volume number and the issue number in parentheses afterwards, and then the page numbers. And in this one, apparently there was not a DOI available. So that's how you cite it. Note also that it's alphabetical and that it's a hanging indent, meaning that the first line is all the way back to the left margin, but after that, the lines are indented. And what that allows you to do is if you see a reference inside the paper, then you can easily find it in the reference section by following it down. And finally, it's double spaced, and I have made a template for you so you can use that to get your proper APA style. If that's helpful, you can download the template and replace my words with your own. Here are some additional resources, and I think you might find many of these things helpful to learn more about APA style, or to refer to guidelines if you have an unusual source that isn't a journal article.